My parents' golden child blew $65K on gambling. Now loan sharks are after him and they want me to pay. All right, I need to get this off my chest. I've been dealing with this my whole life, but recent events have really pushed me over the edge. My parents have always had a favorite, and spoiler alert, it's not me. I have an older brother, Jake. He's 2 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, he's been the golden child. I'm not saying he's a bad person, he's not. But the way my parents treat him compared to how they treat me, it's night and day, and honestly, I'm exhausted. Growing up, Jake got whatever he wanted. I don't mean he was spoiled in the sense that he threw tantrums until he got his way. He didn't even need to. My parents would just hand everything to him on a silver platter. I, on the other hand, had to prove myself for even the smallest things. Jake wanted a new phone. He got the latest model the day it came out. I had to use an old hand-me-down until it practically stopped working. Jake wanted a car when he turned 16. My parents surprised him with one. I had to save up for a used car while working a part-time job in high school. At first, I thought maybe it was just an age thing. Maybe I'd get the same treatment when I was older. But no. It became clear that this was just how things were. School was the worst. I worked my ass off to get good grades. Straight A's, AP classes, all of it. My parents barely acknowledged it. But when Jake passed a class with a C, you'd think he had just cured cancer with how they celebrated. When college came around, it got even more blatant. Jake decided he wanted to go to a private university out of state. My parents paid for everything: tuition, rent, food, a monthly allowance, no questions asked. When it was my turn, they told me they couldn't afford to help and that I should take out loans. I ended up going to a cheaper state school while working 2 jobs just to keep up. The kicker? Jake dropped out after 2 years because he wasn't feeling it. No consequences, no lectures about responsibility. He just moved back home, rent-free, and my parents acted like it never happened. Meanwhile, I was drowning in student debt, trying to build a future for myself without an ounce of support. Fast forward to adulthood, and nothing has changed. I have a stable job, a decent apartment, and I pay my own bills. Jake, still living at home, still getting handouts. He's had a string of jobs that he quits after a few months because they're too stressful. My parents cover his expenses and make excuses for him. He's just finding himself. He's going through a rough time. It never ends. Meanwhile, if I ever bring up anything even remotely difficult in my life, I get hit with, "Well, at least you're independent. You should be proud of that." And now, the thing that pushed me over the edge, the house. My parents recently told me they're planning on retiring soon. I thought, okay, good for them. Then they dropped the bombshell. They're planning on leaving the house to Jake, not splitting it, not selling it and dividing the money, just giving it to him. Their reasoning? He needs it more. I was stunned. I asked them how that was fair. I reminded them that I had worked for everything I had, that I had taken care of myself without their help, while Jake had been coddled his entire life. Their response? That's exactly why you don't need it. You've proven you can take care of yourself. I can't even put into words how furious I was. It's like my independence is being used as a punishment. Like because I refuse to rely on them, I'm somehow less deserving. Meanwhile, Jake, who has done nothing to show he can handle responsibility, gets rewarded. I tried to have a calm discussion with them, but they just kept brushing me off. It's not about fairness. It's about helping him. As if I haven't needed help. As if I haven't spent my entire life watching them bend over backward for him while I got scraps. So I've decided I'm done. I'm not going to fight for a place in a family that clearly doesn't value me the same way. I'm going low contact. Not cutting them off entirely, at least not yet. But I'm done being the backup plan. I'm done being expected to be the responsible one while Jake gets everything handed to him. I don't even want the house. It's not about that. It's about respect. It's about being seen as an equal, as someone who matters just as much as he does. I don't know what's going to happen from here. Maybe my parents will come to their senses. Maybe Jake will actually step up for once. But honestly, I'm not holding my breath. I'll update if anything changes. Update. Well, I wish I could say things got better, but they didn't. If anything, they got worse. A lot worse. So I recently found out that Jake has a serious gambling problem. And I don't mean a casual poker night with friends. I mean he's been losing thousands of dollars at casinos and online betting. He's completely addicted. How did I find out? Because my parents started asking me for money. At first, it was subtle. My mom mentioned that they were tight on cash and asked if I could help with some bills. Then my dad called a few weeks later asking if I could lend them a little to cover some unexpected expenses. I was confused because my parents are usually pretty well off. They've always been financially stable. Then, I got a notification that one of my bank cards had been used at a casino, a card I never use, a card I had left at their house once. I confronted them immediately. Turns out, Jake had been stealing money from them for months. And when he ran out of ways to drain their accounts, he took my card and used it to fund his addiction. I was livid. I told my parents that this was completely unacceptable, that they needed to cut him off before he dragged them down with him. But instead of holding him accountable, they made excuses. He's just going through a rough time. He's stressed, and gambling helps him cope. He didn't mean to take your card. He just thought we wouldn't mind. I lost it. I told them that I was done, that if they wanted to keep enabling him, that was their choice, but I wasn't going to be part of it. I demanded they pay me back immediately, and when they hesitated, I told them I would take legal action if needed. That got their attention. They paid me back, but things are icy now. My parents still refuse to see Jake for what he is, a grown man who refuses to take responsibility for anything. And I know it's only a matter of time before he drains them dry. But wait, it gets worse. After cutting Jake off, I started hearing from extended family members. Apparently, my parents had been borrowing money from relatives, too. My aunt called me, asking if everything was okay because my parents had asked her for a small loan to cover some bills. That's when I realized how deep this went. Jake wasn't just stealing from them. He was putting them in financial ruin, and they were too blind to stop it. So I did some digging. I found out that Jake had maxed out multiple credit cards in my parents' name. They either didn't know or were pretending not to. When I confronted them about it, my dad got defensive and said, "It's just a phase. He'll pay it back when he gets on his feet." I asked how exactly Jake planned to do that when he had no job and no plans to get one. They had no answer. Then, the ultimate betrayal happened. My parents called me a week later and begged me to loan them money to cover Jake's debts. They assured me it would just be temporary, that they were handling it, and that Jake was really trying to change. I refused. And that's when the guilt trips started. They told me I was being selfish, that family helps family, that I had a good job, and Jake was struggling, that I wouldn't even miss the money, that they raised me better than this. I told them in no uncertain terms that if they wanted to destroy themselves for Jake, that was their choice, but I wasn't going to be a part of it. And then, the final straw. My parents tried to access one of my bank accounts. I got a fraud alert saying someone had attempted to log in. It didn't take a genius to figure out who it was. I immediately changed every password, locked down my credit, and made sure there was no way they could access anything of mine. When I confronted them, they played dumb. Then they got angry. Then they started crying. They swore up and down it was just a mistake, that they just wanted to see if they could take out a loan in my name to help Jake get back on his feet. I was done. I told them they had officially lost my trust, that I was going no contact, that if they tried anything like this again, I would press charges. And Jake? Last I heard, he's still living at home, still gambling, still making excuses. My parents are still enabling him, but now they're running out of money to do it. I don't know how long it will take for them to hit rock bottom, but I'm no longer going to be the safety net when they do. I'm heartbroken. I never wanted things to turn out this way. But at the end of the day, I can't keep lighting myself on fire to keep them warm. If anything else happens, I'll update again. But for now, I'm out. Final update. I honestly didn't think things could get any worse. I figured at some point, reality would hit my parents, and they'd finally see Jake for what he is. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that some people will cling to their delusions no matter how much it destroys them. A few days ago, I got a frantic call from my mother. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. I thought someone had died. Turns out Jake got himself into serious trouble, like life-threatening trouble. He had been borrowing money from loan sharks, not just a little either. We're talking $65,000. And shocker, he hadn't paid them back. So they came to collect. According to my mom, a couple of guys showed up at my parents' house looking for Jake. When they realized he wasn't there, they waited. Hours later, Jake finally stumbled in, probably thinking he could talk his way out of it like he always does. But these weren't the kind of guys you can sweet talk. They took him outside and beat him. Badly. My dad tried to intervene, but they shoved him aside like he was nothing. By the time they were done, Jake had a broken leg, a busted-up face, and a very clear deadline. 1 week to come up with the money or they'd be back. And next time, it wouldn't just be Jake getting hurt. My parents were hysterical. They told me the police wasn't an option because if they snitched, these guys would come after the whole family. Instead, they wanted me to pay off Jake's debt. $65,000. I almost laughed. Almost. After everything he had done, after everything they had done, they had the audacity to ask me to fix it. I told them no, immediately, without hesitation. And that's when the manipulation started. Do you really want your brother to end up dead? Please, we raised you better than this. You have a good job, this is nothing to you. You're his brother, you have a responsibility to help. I shut them down at every turn. I told them Jake made his choices, that they made their choices, and that I wasn't going to bail them out of a mess they had spent years creating. Then came the threats. Not from them, but from Jake. Even with a broken leg, even after being beaten half to death, he had the nerve to call me himself and say, "If you don't help and something happens to me, it's on you." I hung up, blocked his number, and that's when my relatives started calling. At first, it was just a few, an aunt here, an uncle there, telling me I should let go of the past and be there for my family. Then it turned into a full-blown smear campaign. Apparently, my parents had spun the story to make it sound like Jake was just a struggling guy who made a mistake, and I was the rich, selfish sibling who refused to lift a finger to help. I was getting calls and texts non-stop from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, guilt-tripping me about family loyalty. One even said, "If you let your own brother die over money, how do you sleep at night?" I ignored every single one of them. The truth is, I don't know what's going to happen next. My parents are out of money, and I doubt they can come up with $65,000 in a week. I have a bad feeling that when the loan sharks come back, it won't end well. But that's not my problem. It never should have been. I've done everything I could to help my parents see the truth. They refused. Now they have to live with the consequences. As for me, I'm done. For good. This is the last time I'll be updating because honestly, I don't care what happens next. I'm out. They made their choice. Now they have to live with it.